Hello everyone, I'm Wave, and today I'm going to be talking about The House in Fata Morgana. Now this is a visual novel that is pretty well regarded among the people that have read it, but also has kind of broadened its scope outside of the world of visual novels by having the honor of being the highest rated game of all time on Metacritic at one point. Now does it really hold up to that level of pedigree? Let's find out. I would say Fata Morgana is split into two separate portions throughout the game. The first portion being leading more so into, I guess, what would be a mystery novel. When you play through it, you're going to be introduced to the world, entering a mansion, and then you are going to be told various different stories throughout the first half of the game's runtime, and trying to provide context for what has happened within the world. And it does drag on a considerable amount. It is not well spaced, I think, at least for my personal preference. The spacing is very just like you end one story, dive right into the next one, and it ends up providing just a very long series of almost similar outcomes that, if you're not personally looking for that kind of, it is going to drag on and it's going to probably push you away. I was pushed away from the game for quite a while until I eventually returned to it many months later. I think the first portion of the game is well done in many regards. However, I do think it almost limits itself by doing this, but it is set up in a way to where most of these smaller stories that are provided during the first half of the game are written almost in like a very Shakespearean sense. A lot of them have to do with, like drama and, like downfall. And once you finally do break free from that first segment, I think that is what a lot of people that have played Fata Morgana really resonate with. I do think the second portion of the story, where you are finally let free from the sequence of Shakespearean stories and are allowed as the main character to actually start doing things and progressing the story, does loosen up. A lot of the writing in the second portion feels much more fluid and very just more natural. And then also during this portion is where I would describe, Fata Morgana, whether you're going to resonate with it or not. Fata Morgana, how you're going to resonate with it is very dependent on, like, I guess, where you are in life. There's a great deal of probably potential messages that you can kind of take away from the game after finishing it. And I do think probably the strongest that I found during the second half of the game is a story of, the protagonist and kind of just being able to accept oneself and being able to like love themselves, and also being able to finally just be themselves. I don't know, it's a very like interesting kind of intricate layer to where I think how you perceive Fata Morgana is going to very much depend on, how well the tones and like general beats when it comes to the message that you take away from Fata Morgana hits with you and where you are in life. Fata Morgana is kind of like a story about a feeling of oppression and not being able to be true to oneself, but then also being able to finally like break free from that, have a level of acceptance of oneself, and then also being able to find acceptance in others, where I don't know, it's a tale of romance, it's a tale of tragedy, and I do think Fata Morgana does a great deal in being able to portray that. And I don't know, Fata Morgana to me is a enjoyable game once it finally gets into that enjoyable part. Unfortunately for me, I do think Fata Morgana is a bit of a slow burn. It does take far longer than I think the usual visual novel takes in order to get to the portion where you're gonna thoroughly start to enjoy it. For me, I believe it took me around like 8 hours in order to finally get to that portion of the game where I was hooked and wanted to read more rather than forcing myself to read more. Fata Morgana overall is a very solid read, and I think if you are willing to stomach the early portions of the game that may or may not vibe with you, as for just providing a very Shakespearean, almost tragedy setup throughout, its opening hours, I think you are going to enjoy it. It is worth a read if you are willing to push through the initial portions. I guess one thing I can talk about is the music. A lot of people like to, merit Fata Morgana on its soundtrack. I've also seen a decent amount of people say that, the first portion of the game is very repetitive. The loops maybe don't hit like the loops maybe aren't, as concise. And then also, I don't know, some of it is just very like tonal, very like drowning. I do think once it introduces more songs as the story progresses and you get from story to like, smaller story to smaller story, and then finally get to the bigger, broader picture, they have more soundtracks at their disposal and they're able to kind of sprinkle them out more fluidly. Soundtrack is quite solid. I don't think it's personally one of the best, but I do think it is quite good for what it is. Also, one thing that I almost forgot to mention, depending on whether you're playing on PC or console, PC does not have voice acting at all. And that is the version that I played. I personally don't think it really affects the overall presentation of the story at large. If anything, I do think that the fact that I was able to enjoy the story despite there not having voice acting in order to, push, further when it comes to all the emotional dialogue does speak volumes to the quality of the story. But if that is a deal breaker for you, I would say, go ahead and make sure that you play it on console. I don't know if it is available on the eShop for like the Switch. I know it is a very expensive game if you're trying to pick it up physically, so I would probably advise against that unless you are a diehard fan that has already read Fata Morgana and know for a fact that you want to pick up a copy for like $100+ But you do you. And I figured that's just like a little small detail. Thought it was worth mentioning. Fata Morgana. I do think it is a game that is going to resonate with people many different ways. And overall, I do think it is well worth a read if you are willing to get into it. I've been Wave. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.